year much more from last year for Rye 400 in case anybody ever showed up. So this year is a lot less. Still, we have some awesome programs that we continue as the Rye Historical Society. So tonight, I want to introduce you to Guy Philbrick Hadley, who will speak tonight. He will talk about Philbrick, who obviously had a very intriguing, amazing life, and we'll hopefully know more about that after Guy is done. So just a few words about Guy. He was born and raised here, right here in Rye. In fact, his family has been managing the Rye Beach Hotel over on Strauss Point. He went to college, got a degree in biology and chemistry, joined the Coast Guard, pretty much spent his life, his career in the Coast Guard, then retired from that, and was later hired by the state of Florida as a biologist, and did that for a long time. He's now spending his time about 50-50 between Rye and Florida. Didn't ask him where exactly in Florida, but somewhere everywhere it's nice.
Outside Orlando.
Okay, outside Orlando. Now, why is he talking
Claremont.
about her? Well, his mother was her sister. So that's what Guy's connection is to her. So yes. And without any further ado, Guy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I can't believe how many people are here. Is my mic on? Are we all set?
Yes.
Okay. I can't hear it. Can't believe how many people are here to learn about someone that died a long time ago. But he did have an interesting life, and we will. Oops, how does this work? There we. Oops. Yeah, but how do I back it up? Oh, I see. How to go to 3?
Like that. Yep.
Okay. So, you know, when you talk about things that happened in the 40s or a long time ago, and you look at history, you've got to kind of put yourself in that area, in that era, because, you know, trying to see what he did back in those days and trying to, you know, equate it to today, it's a little bit different. So anyway, anybody know where this is? Hey, geez, everyone does. See if I can not mess this up. Okay, it was advertised as the third life, but actually with Herb, it's his first life. Has anyone read the book? Has everybody read the book? Raise your hands. Oh, not many. Okay. All right, so I will adapt it to this. The first fact is Herb and my mother, who was his sister, just loved Rye and Seacoast, New Hampshire. And he spent as much time as he possibly could here with his, he worked in Boston and places like that, and also lived in New York for a while. But, whoops, get used to this. He wrote 2 books. The first one came out in 1952, 3 or 4 years after he testified against communists in the United States. The other one, he rewrote the book. It's a little bit different. He removed a little bit of the family stuff. Is more the counter spy and stuff like that. So anyway, who am I? You know, you heard a little bit about it, but I was born and raised in Rye. And when I was raised here, there was some interesting things, like I was in the first Little League team that wherever we had. You know, Flash Jennis was my coach back in those days, and you know they've named the field after him now. I understand, but anyway, I had 3 lives too, and where my first life was actually in the Coast Guard, and I was stationed in several different places, and I worked search and rescue, and towards the end of my career, I worked in maritime security. And of course, the Coast Guard's a small budget, and you know, so we have to ad lib, and just so that I won't have any stolen valor, I never shot a .50 caliber in war. So anyway, and I served for a total. Whoops, geez. Okay. I served for a total of 26 years. That was my first ship out of Portland, Maine. Well, we like Portland, Maine.
26 years.
20. Oh, thank you. I also worked as a biologist for almost 20 years, or over 20 years. And, I had degrees in biology and chemistry, but they hired me because I could drive a boat. And, this is in Central Florida, so it's not really a good place for a Yankee to be down there with snakes and alligators. I got used to the alligators. I never got used to the snakes. So anyway, and now I'm retired, and I am now a clean-cut military veteran guitar playing biker, and a founding member of the Northeast chapter of the Wild Hogs. My brother-in-law was supposed to be here, and he's the other member. I'll get into Herb. Don't worry, I will. I'm the oldest son of Herb's sister, Ruth Philbrick Hadley, and she married Otis Newbury Hadley, our father, in 1946. And I mention him because he had quite an influence on Herb, and we'll get into that. That was my mother in high school. You can notice where she is in Genesee Beach, and you can see Straws Point up there, that way it looked back then. And in her entire 88 years that she lived, she never had to drive to the beach. So, I think that's a pretty good claim to fame. My mother had 3 kids, me, my brother, Brad, and you notice my middle name is Philbrick, my brother's middle name was Herbert. My mother was a younger sister, and she idolized Herb. She really did. And then the third one is Sherry, who's right here. And we are Herb's nieces and nephews. And Sherry never liked this picture, so I added this one with her smiling. So whoops, good grief, what have I got fat fingers here? We lived at the Rye Beach Motel, and where it used to look. And Herb and his family spent summers in the woods behind the motel, and we called it the tent floor. This huge, it seemed huge. We were kids, but it's 2 or 3 stairs up there, and then this wooden deck, and he pitched a tent on it for the family, and he spent summers in Rye. And we actually grew up in the house, which was right next to the motel. This is before a couple of additions, but when I was very young, we didn't have winter water, so it was an interesting place. So the presentation will be on Herb's life and his family and things that aren't in the book, but we'll go over the book a little bit since not a lot of people read it. This is a presentation that his great-grandson did out in Seattle, Washington, Connor Lee. And he sent me some of the pictures, too. They're really pretty good. I wish I'd seen it. But so, Herb's 3 lives as citizen, communist, and counter-spy. And we have the black book and the red book. So since, by the way, my presentations, there are no rules. If you got a comment or if you've got a question about something that I've talked about, ask me. You don't have to wait till the end. But since, you haven't read it a lot, Herb in the early 40s, or 1940, was working as an advertising person in Boston. He had an engineering degree, but jobs were tight then. Turned out he was really good at advertising. And he was very religious, right, even up to the end. And he joined a youth group in Cambridge. And he suspected that it was a front for American Communist Party. And this is where you need to put yourself back in there, because it doesn't seem possible to me, but it was. And so he contacted the FBI, and the FBI first said, yeah, right. And and then they said, well, you're there anyway. Why don't you just see what goes on? And they encouraged him after he started reporting back, and it turns out that they were advocating the overthrow of the country. They were very, in this time, in the early 40s, they were against the United States being involved in World War II because Russia in the beginning, if you remember the history, Russia in the beginning was not really allied with Germany, but they certainly weren't adversaries until later on. So anyway, Herb was kind of a pacifist as well, but he he was so good at it. He quickly rose in the organization. I think it's because his advertising skills. He knew how to promote things, and he went to different cells that they called them youth groups, and he reported back almost daily to the FBI, and he did this for 9 years, and it ended when they were bringing 11 suspected American communists to trial, and they were using an act that is actually still in the books, but it was just enacted, called the Smith Act or the Alien Registration Act, and it had criminal penalties for advocating the overthrow of the U.S. government by violence, and that violence is a key part of that. And also, it had a registration thing where any non-resident, any alien had to register. That's with the Japanese camps and things like that. Also, the German people had to as well. The trial is known as the Foley trials, and it started in 1940. And it's kind of cool reading his book. The first part of the book starts out saying the prosecution calls Herbert A. Philbrick, and it was a surprise witness. They had no idea. I guess you didn't have to give a witness list back in those days. I don't know, but they didn't. The people on trial didn't know that Herb was going to be testifying because they thought he was their buddy, And he, by this time, he was pretty high up, and he went to different places. He was trained, in subversive methods and things like that. And the part of the testimony, his testimony that really got them, is he testified that their intent was to overthrow the government of the United States. And the trial lasted almost a year. And it's interesting. It 1940s, and it wasn't 1940. It was 1949. But anyway, let's see if I've got this. Yeah, it's 49. Sorry about that. My fat fingers. But it lasted almost a year, and Herb wasn't. Whoops, good grief. Herb wasn't. Anyway, back to Herb at the beginning. At the beginning of Herb, I jump around, but there is a method to my madness here. He was born in Rye, New Hampshire. Now, I don't know that he was born in Rye. Wikipedia says he was born in Rye. I thought he was born in Somerville, but we'll go with Wikipedia because our mother was born in Somerville. But he had a.
Several Philbricks in Somerville.
I'm sorry?
There were a number of Philbricks.
Yeah. Yeah, they lived on Winter Street or something. And which was it? Okay. But Herb was the only son of Guy E. Philbrick, hence my name. And he was a conductor on the Boston Maine Railroad. And Alice Philbrick, he married Alice Philbrick, but Guy E. Philbrick was born in Portsmouth, and he lived in Portsmouth, Rye, and in Somerville. his route, he was a conductor, and his route was from Boston to Portland, the main route. So Rye's right in the middle of that, pretty much. So, and those pictures, that's actually a picture of my grandfather when he was a kid. It's like a little girl to me, but I guess that's what they did back then. I remember him looking like on the end. So, if I could not, okay. He retired. I don't know what year he retired, but he died in 1952. So I knew him a little bit. I remember him sitting there smoking a pipe. Always had a vest on. Always had a tie on, even after retirement. And I guess that was his retirement ceremony. His wife, my grandmother, Herb's mother, was born in Elliott, Maine, and she was a Shapley. And if you know, Elliott, Maine, there's a lot of Shapleys in Elliott, Maine. I've never been to the reunion, but it'd probably be fun. But she was. But we found pictures of the Shapley grandfather, would have been Herb's grandfather from Elliott, and again, they went way back. Nice looking guy, huh? My Herb's grandfather lived in Rye and Portsmouth. I don't know if he was a fisherman or what, but he's rowing a boat with a tie and a jacket on, so I don't know. Now, Herb's grandmother didn't die till 1954, and so I knew her. Well, I was 7, 8, something like that, 6 or 7, and that was probably taken, I don't know, probably 1942 or something like that, because my mother was very, very young there. But she was a really nice lady, and she lived with my grandmother in Rye, and she passed away in 1954. The Philbrick family, Herb's family, traces the roots back to Salem, Mass. And interesting, our father on the Hadley side, his family came over about the same time, I think, in the 1630s. And also the Shapley family was an old colonial family in Maine or Massachusetts, when back then it was called. We're also related by marriage to Locks, Wilsons, Higgins, Remicks, probably half of this room. And interesting picture of Straws Point doesn't really look like that anymore. Or Locks, they call it Locks Necks? Lock?
Yes.
Do they? Okay. Okay.
Alma does.
Alma did. Yeah.
Alma did.
Alma did. I knew her well. The Remicks are an interesting part of this area, and that was Herb's aunt and uncle, and we called her auntie. Yeah, that too. And their house was, if you go on to Lock's Neck, you got the Lock house on the corner, and the second house was theirs. They owned that picture's taken in their house there. I always liked going over there because he had a secret room in the basement, and it was pretty cool because he'd been a cop, and he had all kinds of like guns and knives and terrible pictures, but and but his real claim to fame was the port and missing men in Rye Harbor. If you drive over what we call the Red Bridge, the little bridge into Rye Harbor, this was a hamburger joint, and it started out as a coffee joint for the fishermen. This was probably taken in the 40s, might have been the 50s. But I remember my aunt being there, or great aunt being there, making hot dogs and hamburgers, and I'd come back from swimming lessons, and she'd make me a hamburger, and I'd always try to pay, and she'd go, "Save your money." So this is a picture of the pier right across from there. I don't remember it looking like that. So it had rails when I remember it. But it was pretty rickety. And this is before the harbor was dredged. And this is also before the park was down there where all the little lobster shanties are now. So if you were fishing out of Rye, you either tied your boat here at the Remix dock, or there was a what's his name, Herbie Drake, he used to be a selectman. He had a dock maybe 50 yards west of there that he used and Lloyd Hughes used as well. Okay. Ruth's sister is our mother, and she was born in Somerville on March 1st, 1922. And this is this picture was taken in 1929, and there was a newly built house. Before that, there was just an empty lot that they stayed in in the summer. And my mother lived her whole life in Rye. She went away for the winter and stuff, but she interest. I keep thinking I've got an arrow here on my on my mouse to point, but the U.S. life-saving station. My mother said when she was a little girl that was about the only thing on the beach, but most of her time was spent there. This is an interesting picture of in the 30s, and check out that bathing suit. So my mother must have been 14 there, right? Yeah, she would have been 14 there. And you can see that house there is, yeah, it's still there. Hollahans, there you go. Yeah. But they spent a lot of time on the beach, and they were always together on the beach. That was probably high school graduation of my mother. Herb, again, was it 7 years older? And they lived on 79 Old Beach Road in Rye, which was my grandmother's house. And who owns it now? Karen and Rob Vos own that house now, and they've restored it. But before there was a cottage there, this was actual picture of Herb and my mother and my grandmother. They had a tent, and it was on what's now 95 Old Beach Road, and they would stay there all summer while my grandfather, Herb's father, would be running back and forth from Boston to Portland, and they finally built a cottage, and Herb spent his summers there as well. This is when it was first built in the 30s, and there it's still there in the 40s. You can see the old 40s car, at probably a Packard or something. Herb's father in 1938 beside the cottage there, and this is what it looks like yesterday. So it's still there. It's got two floors on it now. It's Genesee. It's interesting to get on to Genesee Beach because I look at that beach. It hasn't changed a bit. I've lived in Florida for a long time, and if you go away for a weekend, the beach changes down there. It's crazy. It's really crazy. But that was probably 1958. So the World War II. I've got this picture there because Eva will become Herb's first wife, and this is at the not quite World War II yet, but the other lady who's in a lot of these pictures is Virginia Jenis, and she was married to Flash Jenis, who was the Little League coach, and she was also one of the first flight attendants or stewardesses on Pan American Airline, in the early 50s, I think. During the war years, Herb did not serve in the military. I don't know whether he had maybe too many kids or possibly, and I never asked him about this, possibly they wanted to keep him infiltrating the Communist Party. I don't know. But the other person was a good friend of theirs from Somerville as well, Darty Coombs. He ended up being a PT boat torpedo man. And again, you can see the house still there. And this is 41. And there are a few more houses there now, 42, but that's the Coast Guard station down there. And they, again, this is after the war. Herb's still there with Eva. Now, maybe you can help me out here. What's holding that inner tube over their head? You know, that
Her left hand.
she's holding that up there. She's rugged. Oh, is there someone behind? Oh yeah, I didn't see that. It's on a bigger screen now. Oh, that's great. That's funny. They were married later that year. They were married in 1938. And
That was a halo over there.
I figured it was something like that. This is from his book, actually, I think. But this is his 5 daughters. He also had a son who was born the year after this was taken. So Herb's 6 children with Eva. Connie, I was talking to some lady here, where are you, that knew Connie, the oldest one, born in 1940. She has passed away in Prince Edward Island, I believe, up in Canada. Sandy owned and operated the Pondview restaurant in Kingston. I don't know if anyone remembers that place, but it was a great restaurant. Dale was born in 42, and she married a guy named Bill Clark, whose family owns the Shelter Island Ferry, I think. But he is a career Coast Guard, retired as a captain, much higher than me. Brenda was closer to my age, a couple of years older. So Brenda and Leslie were kind of our friends, growing up. And Brenda unfortunately passed away in December, I think. Was it December of last year? And Leslie lives down in Pawleys Island, South Carolina now. And Herb Jr. passed away within weeks of Brenda. He lived down there as well in the Carolinas. Herb and Eva, this is just before the book came out, I believe. But they stayed together for quite a while. There's a lot of pictures of Virginia. I don't know why, but and that's the Rye Beach Motel in the background. And when I first started actually talking, sensibly talking to Herb, not being a kid, they were living in White Plains, New York. And I'm not sure what he was doing there. I think because the book had just come out, I think, because as soon as it came out and he made money, he moved back here. In 1946, he met my father. Looks like they're escorting him to prison or something, my father in the middle. And I don't know what the other guy is, probably an ex-FBI agent or something. But I think that was taken in our grandmother's house in Rye. And I mentioned my father because he had a lot to do with Herb and Herb's businesses after he made money with a book and stuff. Now, got the right date here. He was forbidden to talk about the case because it lasted a year, and during that time they were coming and living on the 10th floor in the summer and stuff. And I remember my father telling me that your mother's brother's a little weird, but he was so engrossed in trying to testify. And I think when he first met Herb was still deep undercover, and I remember Herb when we first started talking, kind of like our brother who's passed away as well, kind of very thoughtful, but you know, you don't know what's going on in the head, and Herb was that way too. But anyway, they were all convicted. That Smith Act, I think it's been challenged a few times because of First Amendment rights and things like that.
What happened to the convicted people? Were they sentenced?
They were sentenced. I think they spent. I think it was they were released in like 1957. I think I don't have that in the slides, but I remember reading it that it was a challenge because of First Amendment rights. But again, as I mentioned at the beginning, you got to put your mind in what they were thinking. You know, there's a commie behind every tree. Now there might have been. I don't know. You know, but so. Finally, he published the first book in 1953, so it was a couple of years there where it was kind of lean. I think that's when he lived in White Plains. But the book was a bestseller, and you know, if you get a chance, you ought to read it. It's not horribly well written, but it's interesting. It's you can tell. No offense to any engineer, but it's factual. It's like an engineer would write. You know, or a mathematician, someone who's physicist, someone like that. It's kind of just the facts, man. And it was a bestseller. And again, he rewrote it for some reason in the 70s. The TV show, that's interesting. You can still get this on, I think, YouTube or something. It's really nostalgic. But it ran for 3 years, and it starred Richard Carlson as Herb. And the producers really took some liberties with that. You know, some of the things, I mean, he was having these clandestine meetings in the waterfront and stuff like that. And I don't believe any of that really happened. His big thing was training. You know, for the communists, he was training them and reporting back on what they were up to and the leadership, what they were doing. So he made a lot of money on this. I haven't read anything officially, but I remember when we were kids. I don't know if Sherry remembers it too, but my mother had an article cut out of the paper, and it says Philbrick signs a contract for $2.3 million. And can you imagine that in 1950? I can't imagine it today, but imagine that in 1953. So Herb really didn't know what to do with millions of dollars. He bought a house on Chapel Road, not the one he died in, but it was kind of a stone mansion. And if you go like Fuller Gardens and then drive down Chapel Road, it's on the left. Had clay tennis court. It was quite a house. We used to go there for Thanksgiving dinner, and we were sent upstairs while the adults were downstairs, and that's when we got to know our cousins a little better. So anyway, like I said, he really didn't know what to do with all that money, but my father did. And so in 1958, Herb bought Seacoast Sales, Cott Beverages, from the Silver Brothers in Manchester. And he opened the beverage store, or the distributorship, in what's now Joe's Meat Market in Northampton. And that was a great place to eat. But it's his office was upstairs, and my father's office was Herb's office was downstairs. My father's office was upstairs, and my father kind of oversaw that, and they did well for a while, and but they were competing with Canada Dry. You know, that was kind of so. The same year, a little bit later in the year, they bought Carberry's store. And I was trying to figure out how this went from this to Philbrick store. I was in there once with a little kid. I remember a potbelly stove and a pickle barrel in the corner. But I couldn't figure out how it went from 2-story to that front. And I think they built the front on it. Because here's the here's what it looked like later, and it's the same roof. So he must have put a front on it there. But
Guy,
sir,
I always wondered what year he bought
yeah,
the store, and I came across a Christmas card from Philbrick in the museum last year. And of course, it's the end of the year, and he's announcing to everybody he bought it in 1954.
no,
So
really,
don't ask me. I'm just going on Herb's Christmas card. But,
really, no
yes,
kidding.
seriously.
You know, I was talking to one of our cousins. They had a memorial this summer, and she was saying that they didn't sell it to my father bought the store actually from Herb, but she was saying he didn't buy it till 1969. Now I know that's not correct because I was already in the military for a couple of years by then. 54. I'll be darned. That's how come my slide is so high? I have why is that?
It's been there since the 1920s.
Oh yeah, it's been there a long time. But the store, you know, you see that sign there, Herb Philbrick store. We sell everything, and boy, if you ever been in that store, they sold everything. And my dad used to say, if we don't have it, you don't need it, because my dad kind of ran the store, and then he had a guy that worked for him for years, Dave Rogers. Kind of had a limp. We remind me of Chester and Gunsmoke, but without him, that store wouldn't have kept going, because my dad liked to party and liked to travel, and he was gone all winter. So that is an actual picture of it. This is their postcard, and pretty much the same thing. Those are cars that his buddy Donnie Ring would bring up. Donnie had antique cars, and he would bring them up there. But my father always said, you know, he was a card. I mean, you know, back in those days, he would work the cashier with a Hawaiian shirt on. You know, it wasn't down in Rye, New Hampshire, you know, but anyway, they'd walk out and they'd say something like "thank you," and you go, "Tell them where you got it." You know? So after in the '60s, Herb sold Cott Quality Beverages, and he sold the store to my dad, and I'm thinking it was '65 or so that he sold the store to my father. But it was still Herb Philbrick's store. I mean, he kept that name. That was part of the sale. And he was, you know, during this time, I got to talk to him, you know, and he certainly was there's the arrow. There we go. It's gone now. All right. He was a firm anti-communist and very conservative, but he really wasn't that radical. You know, everyone said, "Oh, yeah, he's a John Birch Society," and now I've read online where he was, but he told me he wasn't. So I don't know. And he would not have anything to do with the McCarthy hearing, which put him up a notch in my anyway. But and he was quoted saying that that McCarthy harmed the cause of anti-communism more than anyone he knew, and that he was the hearings were really, as you know from history, really hurting innocent people who just happened to be liberal, you know, and so he remained active in the anti-communist movement throughout his life. In the 60s and into the 70s, maybe through the 70s, he would be called to lecture. He was a very good lecturer. He taught me how to how to talk to a crowd, and you know, he didn't say picture them naked, but he said, and I don't do this all the time, but if there's a big crowd and I'm nervous about it, I'll pick someone in the audience who's very attentive, and I'll look at that person like I'm having a conversation. He told me to do that. He says that way you're not, you're really not nervous about it. You're just talking to someone, So anyway, he moved back to the Seacoast, and he actually, with his hands, I'm sure he had contractors too, but he pounded a lot of nails, building that house. And it was kind of across the street from the mansion. It was at the corner of Chapel Road and what's that one that goes by Abernathy? Yeah, yeah. So it was kind of there, almost on the corner. He
What did you lecture about?
anti-communism, and what to look for and what the communists were hoping to, what were they up to? I remember in 1969, we had the Peace March. Not we, but there was a Peace March in Washington, D.C., November, I think. Well, I was there, and I was there because my ship was in Baltimore, and we knew there were girls there, and so we went, and Herb and my mother were sitting up in the what was that called? Oh, he was the national director of the Anti-Communist Council in Washington, D.C. It was a nonprofit, and I don't know who funded it, but they were up watching the Peace March while I was getting tear gassed in Georgetown. And then I went back to the ship. So, during that time, and he also had, I remember sitting on the ship up in Portland on the early morning watch on the quarterdeck, and we had a radio in the little shack there, and usually we're listening for music, but I got Herb on there somehow talking about, communists, and I left it on, and it was kind of interesting, listening to him. And I'm thinking this was 1969, or maybe 70, because I was on the ship for a few years. During that time, he met Shirley, and I don't know whether she worked with him or what. And she's quite a bit younger, and they married. Herb got divorced earlier that year, and he married Shirley in 1969. Shirley, that's their wedding in '69. They were married at St. Andrews by the Sea, and they say that's Rye. Is that Rye? I thought it was Northampton. But anyway, is it Rye Beach? Okay, all right. And my mother and my sister were married there, right? Yeah. And my mother, of course, was at the wedding with Herb. My mother and Herb stayed very, very friendly throughout all this, even though she kind of disapproved with the divorce and all that, which we won't go into. But she still, Herb was still, she idolized Herb, and always would. And of course, it's her only brother as well. Like I'm her only brother. So, and Herb and Shirley had a daughter, Dawn, and this is a picture in, it says it's 82, but I think it might be earlier than that, because the house, this is the 95 Old Beach Road house. But Herb and Shirley stayed together for the rest of his life, and hers as well. This is their house on Chapel Road, the one that they built. Pretty nice house, 2-story, and it was always being built. Every time we went over, they were building something else onto it. So I'm not sure if it ever really finished. Herb, again, stayed close to my mother. This is her second marriage. And there's my sister Sherry, and there's her daughter Amanda, who's now what, 45? So I thought Amanda was going to be here. That'd be cute. Uh, Virginia Dennis again stayed friends with Herb and my mother. This the 80s. I'm not sure where this was taken, but and this is at in Rye. Must have been my grandmother's house. No, it couldn't have been. Couldn't have been. I'm not sure where it was taken, but it was probably in Northampton. Again, they stayed. This was 1992, and this is my mother's last husband, and me. I'm still in the Coast Guard, I see. Herb died in his home in Chapel Road on August 16th, 1993, and he was 78 years old. He had cancer. He died of cancer, and it was quite a to-do when he died. There was a lot of things going on, and kind of people were wanting to know more about him. I think his book sales went up on the red cover, the 76 one. A lot of news articles. And Herb and Shirley. Shirley died not that long after Herb, 2 or 3 years. Dawn. What's her husband's name? Lambert. Lambert. Yeah. So Dawn, his daughter Dawn, married Lambert from York. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, this is the Rye Center Cemetery, and there's as you drive in, there's a big sign that says Philbrick, and all the Philbricks are there. And my mother and everything. We'll probably be there someday. Hopefully not too soon.
He was a Mason?
He was a Mason, yes. Yes. He belonged to a lot of organizations. He was given membership in the Adventurers Club in New York City, which was very prestigious, I guess, and all from that counter spy thing. It's hard to think what that must have been, but the 9 years being undercover, and regardless of whether he was in danger, he certainly thought he was in danger. And towards the end of his life, he always carried a pistol, and he flew. When he flew, he used assumed names, and he would book 1 or 2 different flights. So I don't know if they were actually after him, but just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. So, it was interesting because he always had, like my grandfather, his father, he always wore a suit and a vest, and he had that. I think it was a little 38 in a holster under his armpit. So first one I ever knew that did that. His legacy. Herb and Eva again had the 5 kids, and Connie married Roland Smith from Rye. I think Roland was from Rye, and they had 4 kids. Sandy is the one who owned the Pondview, and she had 2 kids, Wanda and Christy, and they still live in Kingston, in Kingston now, which very close to where the Pondview was. Dale again married the Coast Guard captain, and they had 2 kids. Brenda had, let's see. Oh, Sandy married Eddie Ireland from Rye, and I think they divorced soon after that. But Leslie had 2 kids, David and Julie, and her grandson was that Connor who did that presentation out in Seattle. Herb Philbrick Jr. had a kind of rough life. He had a lot of problems, and his sisters really took good care of him, and towards the end of his life, and again, he wasn't that old, and Brenda kind of took care of him down in South Carolina. Herb and Shirley had the 1 child, Dawn. again, married to Lambert. I don't know whether she has kids or not. I understand that there was a book club reading Lila Through Lives, I think last year. The Vos that owned my grandmother's old house were hosting it, and I believe Dawn came up for the last reading of the book, but I haven't seen her for years. Our mother, Ruth, passed away. She was 88 years old, and she died at the beach house. And her legacy is Sharon Hadley Gross has one daughter, Amanda. Brad Hadley has one daughter, Allison. Brad's wife is here, and Allison Kate. And Guy has no biological kids, but got some stepkids and a bunch of grandkids assorted. Now, where's that arrow? Okay. Now, on the end is Connor, who gave the presentation. On the other end is, his sister is in the middle, and she looks like she's little. Well, she's not, because Luke is 6'8", and Logan's what, 6'4"? Caden is, they're not biological, but those are mine, sort of. They're 6'3" and 6 foot, so, she's not really, she's actually quite a tall girl. So, and this is this past summer. They come up here a lot. And since the other one wasn't there, we have the youngest one, and he is Jace Philbrick, Bouchard, Amanda's kids and Sherry's grandchildren. Cute pictures, though. And that's about what I got. And thank you for listening. Any questions? Any questions about anything?
Is the house on Cable, the stone house on Cable, not on Cable, on Church, is that still standing?
I don't know.
There's a stone house before you get to, coming from.
Fuller Gardens.
Yes.
Okay.
Down towards.
It might be it. I haven't driven up that road for a long time. I remember, I got a lot of Herb stories, but I decided not to put a lot of them in there. But I forget, I was probably, 14, and the house was a mansion. I mean, it was a big, beautiful house, but it wasn't manicured. The tennis court was a clay tennis court, and Herb says, "I'll pay you to burn the weeds off the tennis court." So he goes to the Army surplus store and gets a flamethrower. I'm 14. I'm maybe younger. So he says, "This is how you use it." Now, why he knows how to do that, maybe it's a communist thing. I don't know. But so he gives me this flamethrower, and I'm burning weeds. It was fun. So yes, sir.
Herb have an aunt, Cece.
Yes. Yes. Cecil. Yeah. Wilson, I think, right?
Chubby Wilson's mother.
Chubby. Yeah. They were
next door to the Ocean Boulevard. And the little cottage, she had the third one in.
Oh yeah. I remember we used to call her Aunt Cece. Yeah. Well, they were related to, my grandfather's brother is Ray Philbrick. And our 95 Old Beach Road is, if you drive from 1A to Old Beach Road on Genes, we're on the right-hand side. Now on the left, you're going towards the beach, is the house that used to be Uncle Ray's house, Ray Philbrick, who was, I guess, one of his kids married one of the Wilsons. But I know Bobby Higgins and those guys, they're our cousins somewhere.
I remember seeing her with a couple of bodyguards.
Oh, yeah.
He visited Cece.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting to watch him, and we just thought it was, and interesting, the I Led 3 Lives thing. I was very young, but I was allowed to stay up and watch it. And I was, looking at my slide there, and it says it comes on Saturdays at 9 o'clock. I can't imagine being allowed to be up at 9 o'clock, but I was allowed to stay up and watch Herb. Of course, it wasn't Herb, but, and boy, if you ever watch those things, it's amazing. It's amazing the things that they said he did. So anyway, anything else? Yes, sir.
Where did the communist activities take place? Were in New York or?
Mostly Boston, Cambridge area, but he went everywhere. He became one of the, what did my mother say? One of the 10 top communist trainers, and he would go to different cells. I don't know how he did that with his job, but anyway, he did, and I believe that's in his book. It's been a while since I've read both of them.
How he kept his identity?
I remember in White Plains. I don't know if Sherry remembers this, but we went to White Plains, and he had a secret room, and it was kind of cool. You went up a stairway, and if you didn't know there was a wall, something behind that wall there. I don't know how he did it. I think the only person who knew, and evidently she was very good at keeping the secret. And like I said, my father thought he was really strange, because he was preoccupied all the time, I guess, and I don't think he carried a gun back in those days, but I know after he came out, so to speak, he certainly did. So, anything else? Yes, sir.
The wealth that he received from selling the book and the TV show, what eventually happened? I know he started a few businesses, bought some stuff. Did it last, or did it evaporate?
Not really. My father made some money, but no. He wasn't a good businessman, and now I believe his divorce cost a lot. If you can believe my cousin Dale, I'm not sure now, but their mother evidently got quite a settlement out of that. Dale told us that she owned the store, which is not true, because I know my father bought that from her, not from Eva. Eva lived with you, right, Sherry? Yeah, after the divorce. Yeah. So, yes, sir.
How many generations back does your family go in Rye?
I think the Philbricks go back. I'm not sure how in Rye, but they go back 12 generations, and we on the Hadley side are 12, isn't it? We might be 11. But interesting, they came into Salem, and of course we know what happened in Salem. I don't know if any of the Philbricks were hanged as witches, but I know 2 of the Hadleys were, and one of them was the movie The Crucible. And by the way, she wasn't 17, she was 70, Susanna York. Martin North, that's it, yeah. Yeah, that was our relative. My brother used to send out Halloween cards that says son of a witch. So, yes, sir.
St. Andrews by the Sea, according to the Rye 400, was started by a Philbrick.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
It might have been a relative. I don't know. There's a lot of Philbricks in Rye. I don't know if we probably related if you go back far enough. Was it what? I think it might. Well, it is now, isn't it? Isn't it?
Cody Philbrick started the Farragut, and they bought that they created St. Andrews for patrons of the hotel.
Oh, for the Farragut.
For the Farragut.
Well, that was Bill Cotter.
They brought the guests over in carriages.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember visiting Bill Cotter just before they sold it.
That was later.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
St. Andrew's, Union Chapel, and Little Harbor Chapel were all built as summer non-denominational chapels.
Oh, yeah.
In the late 1800s, so it wasn't a family one.
It was
Philbrick's land, and
I see.
made that happen.
Well, it's interesting when we were growing up in Rye. There was only one church. and which of course we went to. But they had a summer church, the Catholic church over there. And when my mother married Bill Donnelly, who was Catholic, it was a full-time church there. And I remember Bill came home and he says, our softball team beat the congregational softball team. He was so happy. So, and I'll tell one little story. I wasn't at the wedding when my mother got married. I was, I don't know, stationed somewhere. And so I met Bill that summer because I always took the month of July and came home, wherever I was, unless I was out to sea. And so anyway, I came up and they'd been married, 6 months or so. And I hit it off with Bill right away. He's an old Navy guy, and tattoos and the opposite of my mother, who was a Puritan. And so we're walking on Jenna's Beach. Of course, my mother had been there for generations. Well, her generation anyway, knew everybody, and we're walking, just the three of us, Bill, my mother, and me. And she ran into one of her old cronies. Might have been Elma, I don't know, Elma Locke. But anyway, it was someone that she'd known forever. And she, after they talked a little bit, she says, oh, my son Guy, and this is my husband, Bill Donnelly. He's Irish. When we were kids, they didn't let him in town. Now they live in my house. I looked at Bill and he said, whatever. So it was very interesting. Yes, anything else? Boy, I kept right on time, didn't I? Thank you.